Everybody else thinks 8:30?
I got the same time as last
Yeah.
August 29th, 8 o'clock. Revenue, Ms. Chief, I assume you're the star of that show?
Yes, sir.
Well, good morning, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
So I think kind of the best way to start is just to give you guys an overview of how we budget our revenues, kind of the methodology behind it. So what we typically do is we take a look at each of our revenue line items we're getting ready to budget. And we see what we've collected for the year, and then we take into account prior year actuals for any months that we do not have yet. And we use that as a basis for our next year's budget. So it is a very conservative way to budget. There are exceptions to that, so at times we will add a little bit of growth into some of our revenues. I think the mayor mentioned that we had a handful of revenues that we added growth to.
A handful of revenues, what?
That we added growth to. So we'll do that when we feel like, yes, sir?
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
What drives, if you increase it, what drives that? Or what
Yes, sir.
backs that up to say, we want 2% or 1.5% or 3 or whatever? What drives that?
That's a great question. So we will add growth if we feel that the growth in the current year supports adding growth. So for example, we added growth to SSUT. Currently, it's up about 18% for the year. We added 5%. So we were very conservative with what we added, if that makes sense. We still try to remain conservative no matter whatever the growth is. So we also added growth to county sales tax, and business licenses. We added 1% growth. Those are up between 3 and 6%. So we try to remain conservative with what we add back. We don't want to match the growth exactly to what we have.
Sure.
If that makes sense. Water, sewer, very similar. We look at where we think we'll be for the end of the year, and we use that as a basis for our budget. So for water and sewer revenues, we think that we will meet budget this year. So that's what we used as a basis. So we took that and we added the 9% proposed rate increase on top of that. So that's what we have budgeted this year for water and sewer. So that's kind of the overview of how we budget. Do you guys have any questions on that?
My question would be, how do you define that distinction between very conservative and wrong? Wrong. And I don't mean that to be flippant. I mean, the budget estimate is an estimate.
Sure.
And certainly one comes away, if one overestimates revenue, just as if one underestimates expenses. One comes away with egg on their face. So are there patterns of those budget estimates, that are incorporated into next year? Patterns, not isolated
Sure.
events, number one. And number two, as we start moving through the year, obviously on our expense side, we go through numerous budget revisions during the year. It will become apparent that the budget, which is a web of estimates, is wrong. And so continuously during the year, we update those expense estimates via revisions. What do we do similar for revenues, or do we?
May I?
Sure.
May I, Mr. Busby, because I'm, in the end, I'm the one that directs A&F to whether increase, decrease, or hold flat to what we believe are the projections. In the case of sales tax this year, which we recommended a 1% increase, which I think you'll see in a few minutes actually will be a little bit less than that, because we think projection, since you have another month of revenue, we think projection actually is going to exceed that. So you may be back to closer to what we think we will collect at the end of the year. But what we do is, number one, we look at historical trends. For example, city sales tax has an average growth rate over the last 5 years of 4%. So we know just through historical context, we think that we're going to see that growth. We then take a look
And
at.
do we incorporate that 4% in the budget, in the revenue estimate?
No, we use it as a data point, but we don't say because we grow at an average rate of 4%, then we're going to project 4% growth in fiscal '24. My budget projected a 1% growth based off the revenue data that we had at the time. You're about to get an updated revenue data that is even painting a better picture. The great thing about what Ms. Sheep does is that in any revenue projections she provides me, she provides us to date, and then she assumes that we will collect prior year for the remainder months of the fiscal year, if that makes sense. So anytime that I'm looking at something that's projecting out revenue, I'm looking at a point in time where what we've collected, and then it's making the assumption that we will hit where we hit last year. Again, we're trying to be very conservative in that approach. So for sales tax, which is really the main driver, you could look at when you disaggregate and you look at the different segments of the economy in Tuscaloosa. I felt that looking at those things, knowing the fall we're about to have, that I felt confident in 1%. Plus, I believed and was held to be, this is where experience helps. I felt that the revenues that you would have would be higher, and they are. They're about $800,000 higher than what I had. So that's what led us to that point. Business licenses, that's pretty easy. I think, did we project any growth on business licenses?
1%.
That's a rear view mirror shot. So you can take your sales tax collections from this year, apply it backwards, and then that gives you a pretty good idea of what you're going to get. Property tax, we recommended.
We did not add any growth to property tax.
So we stayed even. SSUT, although we're still only getting 65 to 70 cents on the dollar, as more people go into SSUT, your SSUT number is going to increase. It's just the marketplace. Again, remind you, it's a nice little growth bump, but again, you're getting 65 cents on the dollar, so you're not getting what you're really earning in that. So that's the calculus that goes into it. The historical norms, the state of the economy, those things are what lead us to come to you with these small adjustments. There's no 4, 5, 6% growth that we're out there saying we're going to get. So we feel fairly confident it's about as good of an educated guess as you can get. Now let me say the last qualifier. At the end, it's a prediction. I mean, at the end, it's even budgeting prior year growth or prior year collections is a prediction. So it's the best prediction we think we can provide you as a team. I hope that my monologue answered your question.
I think so. What's worried in the back of my mind is if we historically experience a 4% growth rate in revenues, and we, as a matter of course, estimate a 1% growth in it, then are we typically experiencing to make the math simple, $200 million in general fund revenues? A 4% growth is $8 million a year. If our estimates are 1%, we're up $2 million a year. Should leave $6 million a year if the pattern holds. Am I understanding that correct?
It's not apples to apples because sales tax is going to grow at a greater rate than.
No, I understand. There's a lot of things homogenized in that revenue.
I think you're concerned we're leaving a lot of meat on the table, and under. I think if I'm following you right, we're not projecting enough growth in our budget. For me, you've heard me use this term, I like for our budgets to have backstops. So if we project very conservative revenue growth, that gives us a backstop against a bad economy. If we budget aggressive expenditure growth, that gives us a good backstop because normally you don't have as conservative of revenues, normally you don't have as aggressive expenditures. So we've got some room for the inevitable sinkhole. Or the thing that none of us here today, when you have when you have over 1,000 miles of water, sewer, stormwater out there, there's something that's going to fail. I know that, for one person that's a hard thing to understand, but just like our cars at home and our roofs on our house and everything else, there's always going to be something that goes sideways. And so I think giving ourselves some cushion
Yeah, that makes logical sense. to
It
me.
gives us a lot more room, so you don't have to go against a line of credit during your budget year.
And
That's kind of the philosophy
I would
of
like
it.
to make one quick comment just in conjunction with that line of thinking. The way that we do our budgets and the way that we can plan for capital projects into the future is based off of the surplus that we can accumulate throughout the year. Your surplus is literally made up of two things. You can nickel and dime a couple of other things, but majorly two things. Number one is going to be revenue growth. Number two is going to be salaries savings and the vacancies that we hold throughout the year. And this council within this term has been blessed to have excellent surpluses for the time that you've been in these seats. That is extremely unusual. And however, we would like to attempt to preserve that as much as possible. That continues our conservative budgeting on the revenue side. And because we are a revenue-based, we budget everything else with revenue as the focus. We budget revenues first and we let expenditures fall from that. We do not budget expenditures and try to make the revenues match it. That way we can stay as conservative as possible on the expenditure side and because we can predict revenues as closely as we do. So I would like to just say that when you're looking at possible revenue growth, if you want to budget revenue growth, and I will be honest, Becky and I will continuously inform the mayor throughout budget season while we're formulating these that we do not like revenue growth. We do not like to budget revenue growth. We do not like to anticipate revenue growth because it puts you back on your heels just a little bit. Even if we historically have a 4% growth rate over the last 5 years, it still puts you back on your heels just a bit, hoping that everything maintains. And so if you want to have the surpluses that you've seen before, even though I know last year $14 million of a surplus probably will not duplicate itself, if you still want to have something decently healthy, then budgeting extremely conservative on the revenue side is key. That's my monologue.
Very good. Thank you. And the question was not put out there as a challenge to change it. It was more so that we, on the council and the finance committee in particular, understand what we should be seeing as we move quarter by quarter through the year, and y'all do your quarterly budget and revenue updates to us. Thank you. Go ahead.
And if I could, one caveat to the monologue is I do believe that we could always in the past look at sales tax and use that as a great barometer for how our local economy is doing. You heard the other day the presentation to the policy group of the chamber about SSUT. That is something we need to continually keep an eye on and focus on, because you're literally, as a city, losing millions that you've earned, not that you won't given to you, that you've earned. You've earned through infrastructure investments, economic incentives. You have earned it, and so that's something moving forward we're going to be very aggressive about with our legislative delegation, business leaders, et cetera, because sales tax, although still the main driver, is as the economy moves from 15% of normal retail purchases online to 20%, you're going to continue to see that stagnation within that sales tax. So it's something we're going to continue to monitor, continue to advocate for. If you didn't see the chamber presentation, I would encourage you to take a look at it.
You said it does.
Yeah. It's staggering what we lose as a community on SSUT. And so I just, again, I can't say that enough. As a city, that's something we are going to have to resolve this decade to continue the type of growth. Or the Alabama legislature will have to give us a different revenue source to be able to apply to continue our services. Now I'm done with my monologue, Mr. Busby.
Ms. Sheehan.
Yes, sir. So the only other thing I have left is this packet in front of you. So this is the June quarterly revenue report. The mayor referenced it a minute ago. So since we budgeted, when we did budget for this for fiscal year 24, we had up to May revenues. So now we have June, a little bit of July revenues in.
Okay.
So on the front page, what you'll see is kind of an analysis that shows what we budgeted versus the revenues that have come in since then. So as the mayor mentioned, we have about $887,000 that we could possibly add back in to the general fund, just based on those actual revenues that have come in.
What happened with the lodging tax? Where's that?
So June was down a little bit. I don't quite know why yet. We don't have a whole lot of events in June, but we're gonna keep an eye on that going into football season.
Becky, is it an accurate comparison to look at this? Because I've been kind of going through this, but if you say, we've got 3 basically full months of sales tax to account for, right, left in this year,
Mhm.
1 quarter, right?
Yes, sir.
So when I look at these, to Walt's point about sales tax, when I look just at taxes, right, sales tax,
Mm-hmm.
we're at 88% of our budget right now, which is really good. Should I compare that to 75% would be kind of the baseline if, where we are right now? I mean, does that mean we're 13? I mean, am I reading that wrong when I look over here just specifically at, let's say sales tax 82%, sorry. Are we 7, is it good to say, okay, we think we're gonna be 7% above maybe our budget by this time? Is that kind of where you look at this, or?
So I think what you're looking at, so the taxes on the front page, that's kind of those are numerous tax, like a combination of different lines. Sales tax revenue specifically, if you'll take a look, I think it's page 4. So we're up about 78%. So agreed, I think that it's fair to say that we will project over where we budgeted for the year by the time we get to the end
Oh,
of the year. Yes, sir.
because I mean, we're about to head into hopefully a good September.
Becky, off the cuff, what would that growth be? 3% in city sales tax or 4%?
About 3%, yes, sir.
Based off the new June.
Yes, sir.
If I look at, I'm on page 3, is that sales tax number there? That, getting back to that, what you just said?
Yes,
If
sir.
we're at actual 36 million, budget's 45, is it fair to think we'd be $3 or $4 million over that a minimum, maybe? I mean, because that's averaging
Yes.
about 4 million a month.
Yes, sir, I think that's fair.
So you're looking at the trend.
Mhm.
But that would end up being 40, maybe 4 million over in sales tax. I don't know if that's reasonable, or hopefully it'll be more than that, but. Because if I think, is that 4 million would be, was it, well, 10%'s 4.5, so that's pretty good.
So I think we're estimating that we will be about close to 2 million, I think, over.
2 million over,
Yes, sir.
just on sales tax.
Just sales tax.
So Ms. Chief, in the 23 budget, we projected 175, right? 175 million in general fund revenues.
Yes, sir, that sounds right.
We currently believe we're on track to come in at 204. Am I reading that right?
I think it's about 190 for revenues.
So I'm looking at 2023 actual.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see.
Am I looking in the right place? 2023
Yes, sir.
actual
I'm sorry. I thought you were
204.
asking for fiscal year 24. Yes, sir.
And in the original
So
2023
23
budget book, we projected 175. It looks like it's
So
been
that's a little
revised.
bit skewed, I think, because
Okay.
it has bond issuances in it. It's got the 2022 C in there.
Is that what it is?
Yes, sir.
Without the bond issue, what would it be?
That's 65, 63 and some change.
That's that
Maybe
other.
a
Is that the other operating?
Yes,
And
sir.
what
That's
page
another
you on?
operating.
One?
Yeah,
So-
You back on 1,
Yeah.
Mr. Busby?
Yes.
So overall, right now, what I'd say is if I take a look at our major revenues for fiscal year 23, I'm estimating that we will be over about $8 million for budget. if
Okay,
that
so we
helps.
projected 175, not counting the bond
Yep.
proceeds. We should come in around 183.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments for Ms. Chief? Is there anything else you want to present to us?
Good stuff.
Thank you.
It is, thank you.
You're welcome.
Use 8 times. Is there anything else on the revenue side to be presented this morning? Are there any other questions or comments? All right, then we will adjourn for some breakfast for, let's see, who's, Public Works? Can they be ready? Who's heading that up?
I'm Public Works Counselor.
Okay,
So, one thing that was mentioned last week that we might want to cover before we start into the department details, if you want to go over capital function, it's like the equipment that we have that's set aside, we can do that. If you want to get breakfast, we can go ahead and set up for capital.
let's
and
do
then
that, please.
Okay.
I do want to say before we close out on the revenue, my recommendation to the council on that 887,000, and just put it in your calculus, because ultimately it's all the dollars of the city are y'all's to spend, to be clear. But we would recommend that $500,000 go into the public safety escrow, leading up to the RSA conversion. Our goal internally is to put as much dollars into that to ease that conversion in fiscal '27. And then the remaining 337 be looked at by the council for equipment and vehicle needs. If there is, if there is a chink in our armor in terms of our budget this year, is that we did focus on employee pay increases. I mean, that was where we put our emphasis.
And by the way, I think you see absolutely zero
Yeah,
opposition to that and full support.
the council's been terrific in supporting that. That meant that we probably deferred some additional equipment and vehicle purchases.
So Mayor, when will that presentation show up to finance?
They'll start talking about that.
This is the beginning of that discussion.
Yes, sir. So if you will accept the 887,000 that's kind of in front of you in that packet, we can go ahead and start working that into the calculus. And like the mayor mentioned, there's
The calculus of,
of fiscal year 24 budgeting. So if we're going to use the 887,000 that we think that we can safely project, we will throw that into the fiscal 24 budget, and then we can make a proposal for the 500,000 into RSA, save up, and then we can present you with other equipment vehicle investment options.
how about let's start with Mr. Crowe, Mr. Wilson. Let's start with discussion this morning. Get us eased down into the water, and then let us confer, and we'll give out some guidance of what the next step for that is. All right, but this is the familiarity portion of that. So that's excellent. Can y'all be ready in 10 minutes? And we can still try to hit the 9 o'clock mark on Public Works?
Absolutely.
Great.
Just very quickly, I know that the request last week was to create those departmental front pages with the tables that also had the revised budget amount within them. And so the budget team will be passing those out here in just a moment so that you'll have those before the departments actually start today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, there were two requests, right? This was, since the kind of recurring question at the beginning of each presentation last week was, what's your personnel
The
structure?
FTEs.
That's one. The other one was my request that there be a column that showed not only the starting 23 budget, but what it looks like after revisions up to this point.
So what you're gonna have in front of you is the revised information. The FTEs proved a tad bit more. Are the FTEs in there, London?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're in the packet as well.
STE.
FTEs,
Oh,
full-time
FTE.
equivalents. That's the personnel information. Sorry, that's a,
No, I know FTE, I just wasn't sure we had a short-term.
Carly, these are actual employees, not funded positions.
FTEs are, we fund the FTE. If a person sits in the FTE, then there is a personnel cost associated with it. But when we talk about budget, we are funding FTEs.
Gotcha.
But
When
that
when
may
we talk
not-
about,
That may not match who's actually employed. Like, there may be some openings in these, right?
yes, that is correct. And
Right.
so there
But
are
this is-
openings in
But
there.
this is what the budget's based on, is this number of positions in this department.
Correct. And that type,
So-
that number of position, that type of position, and that position in their grade. If there is a person actually in the FTE, then it will be their step within that grade.
Okay.
Because personnel costs are as big of an expenditure category as it is, we try and, a lot of departments don't love me when it comes to personnel costs. We get a little bit more of a stronger hand when it comes to personnel costs because it is such a large portion of our budget. So no, we track those.
Stronger hand in terms of holding them to what was budgeted?
Yes, sir. And so a lot of the changes that can happen during the year, if there are, different hirings or different changes within personnel, we will make them stay as closely as possible or create offsets within those. Sometimes when you see it come before council during admin committee, you will see that a lot of them will come up here and immediately say, there are no new costs. That's because when they're prepping for a lot of their, personnel movements, I'll say that if you can't get up there and say there's no new costs, I'll have to get up there and say there are new costs associated with this that are unbudgeted. And so they will generally stick to that. They want to be able to come up here and say immediately off the bat, there are no new costs.
So, I'm just flipping through the bacon grease.
Makes it better.
Is there this portrayal for, this is purely the public works group that's presented in here?
Today's presentation.
All the public works departments are in
Or
there.
the other departments will be coming in?
We'll be able to get them to you on the next following days that they all come. And then when we publish the adopted budget book that you will get a copy of once publication day comes, all the FTE information will be in there per department. We'll put that in the adopted one, in the book for you, so that you won't have to have this extra piece of paper that you have to keep up with to be able to have it.
Is it in the 23 published book?
I don't think so, no.
Carl, will most of the people that come up here today, if I ask this question, how many people are you short in your department?
They will know
Will they know
that.
that answer to that question?
They've been prepped to know that, yes, sir.
I mean, I'm just saying if I decide to ask that, right?
If they don't know it, it's not for lack of trying to tell them they should know it. How about that? Okay.
Fair.
If we want to move to capital expenditures, on page 23 of your budget book, you will see a breakdown of all of the operating style equipment that we are proposing to purchase within the budgeted categories that you see at the top of that page. The top of that page starts with the revenue sources. As you can see, 957,000 is within the general fund, and so there is specific equipment that we are funding within the general fund budget. There is $200,000 from water and sewer. There is 2.5 million in the RFFI. That 2.5 million consists of a majority of a transfer from the general fund to the RFFI because we know that that equipment may take longer than a year to acquire. And so we do not want it to lapse with the general fund operating budget. And then the water and sewer RFFI and the ARPA funds are just kind of some freed up dollars that we had that we were able to use to make up, as Mayor Maddox mentioned, we concentrated mostly on personnel costs, and that really took up a majority of the budget. There are equipment needs that are necessary, and to be able to fund those, we kind of had to do some couch cushion scrounging. ARPA money and water and sewer RFI is that scrounging. Yes, sir.
Remind me, last week when I asked that question, we do not, all of our ARPA funds that so far we have been awarded, unless something new happens, have been spoken for
Yes, sir.
in some way or the other, even if all of it had been spent.
Yes, sir, correct. We have about 10 to 12 million dollars that hasn't been spent yet, but it's all obligated.
Okay.
And like I mentioned, I think last week, we're hoping that maybe some of those projects come in under budget. Since Ms. Michael is up today to talk about water and sewer, she has a majority of the remaining open large projects. So you're welcome to ask her that question about how those projects are going. If there's any ARPA funding that might be freed up at the end of her need for them. So that is where the funding sources come from for equipment. You will see the individual equipment piece breakout just below that. So there are 2 U-mount blowers for CFG, 3 zero-turn mowers, so on and so forth. Each piece of equipment will have their department denoted to the side of it, and then the total amount. That obviously goes to the next page, where you will also see a water and sewer item, and then there's a breakdown of all of the equipment that is awarded to each individual department in totality.
So on page 23, those are only general, those individual equipment listings, that's only general fund department.
The one on 23, it continues over to 24, and then on page 24, you will see the water and sewer department one. Kind of broken out individually. It's only one, so it kind of looks a little funky maybe, but
Oh, that pump replacement?
yes, sir.
Okay, that's it?
That's it.
Carly, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna, Eric's gonna talk to us later, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So all the departments are ready to be able to talk about capital expenditures now.
Okay.
It's totally up to you if you'd rather do it with their department or now. Up to you.
I just, I like to go with the department, John's preference.
That's fine.
That's
That's
fine.
fine.
I wanna, as I was perusing the book, I like how you all have, like last year, we did a lot of police and fire, airport, A&E, different things like that. And in this year's budget book, seems like we did a lot of thrust and a lot of push with CFG. So I think, and the savings, if you contrast that, Mr. Busby, last year the total capital expenditures was $3,945, and this year it is $3,907. So I think we've been doing pretty good. Just want to make that notation here.
Anything else on the capital side? If we're gonna talk about it with the departments and how they'll use them in operations, or
Matthew, do y'all
any other
care?
question?
I can go with the
I don't have a
capital
preference.
department.
I'm fine, whatever.
We'll just do it within their
That's fine.
department.
Absolutely. The Public Works is up first.
So we can go ahead and move into that. Who's up first? I'd like you to notice that I'm getting the last squeeze out of the before Labor Day men's fashion attire.
I like it, I like it. I like it.
They start on page 133 of the budget book if you would like to flip.
Good morning, council.
What page, Ms. Tanner?
133.
133. Morning, John.
Pardon me for my attempt at drowning the last bit of these butterflies. I am at a scheduling disadvantage to have to come as the first person behind A and F.
No.
So I'd appreciate any leniency that should be associated with that.
And Senator, before you, get into your, thing, will you give a brief synopsis of what you do and what your department does to help us in our city?
So Public Works has a total of 111 employees. We are divided into 4 divisions. Those 4 divisions include our traffic systems group, our streets and drainage group, fleet services, and administration. Each one of those groups are broken up into various supervised crews that have specific responsibilities. Our traffic group includes the group that does signage, striping, construction zone setups, and they also handle any of our kind of, I guess, sign print stuff that may not be specific to transportation stuff that we can assist other departments with. Our transportation group includes traffic signal maintenance. It includes lighting maintenance. It also includes our animal control and parking control group. Streets and drainage, that's our largest department. It's a total of 8 crews working in that group. We have 4 construction crews and 4 maintenance crews. The maintenance crews focus on ditch cleanouts, curb and gutter cleanouts, our street sweeping, street flushing efforts, and our construction group focuses on things that you see such as pothole repairs, large storm drainage constructions, and you see the drainage construction that is happening in the Oakdale neighborhood. That's from one of our construction departments that handle those.
Thank you.
I've been meeting
That's a good
with
question.
disabled folks, and they're concerned about handicap parking on University Boulevard. Is that you or is that somebody else?
So that's a combination of both my group and the Office of City Engineer. So we are working in conjunction with how to best address those issues as they come in. There are no specific requirements for how many handicap parking spaces you provide. So we're looking at how do we assess those needs and best suit that moving forward.
All right. You're in the water. Go ahead, start swimming.
So again, Public Works has 111 employees. At present, we have 13 vacancies. Those kind of range across different classifications. You've seen us come to you earlier in the year for classification and grade changes, where we have gone from general work specs like crew worker and crew worker seniors and moved more specifically to skilled labor type job classifications like our construction finishers. You're gonna see a little bit more of that as we move forward. What I'd like to point out as well from a management structure, we have identified what I would call gaps in our capacity for management. Each of our 4 divisions are currently managed by an operations manager position. All 4 of those positions report directly to me. We don't currently have a second in charge position for Public Works. So between that, there are some capacity issues, and that is probably not sustainable long-term for efficiency and effectiveness. So we're going to be addressing that as we move forward as a group, and you'll see some recommendations and plans for doing that after that information has been vetted through HR, Finance, and the Mayor's office. Is there anything specific I can answer about any of our expenditures?
Before we move down into that, you're running, I think, from the personnel numbers you outlined, you're running about 90% of full manning.
Correct.
Is that typical, more or less than normal?
That's about typical, and I should say where we sit now is significantly different from where we sat the earlier part of the year. We were seeing a lot more vacancies the first part of the year because of just work people shortages. We were having trouble hiring people, not getting very good candidates in. We are now seeing that slowly shift
It's
to
getting
where
better, not worse.
where we are getting good responses to our solicitations, and we're getting good candidates in with that. So we're encouraged by the pattern that we're seeing in terms of that shift.
Any thoughts on why that might be? Is
So
that something we're doing differently, or
So-
is it a change in the macro
I think it's a little bit of
labor
both.
picture, or what?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a change in the macro from what we saw with the workforce coming out of the couple of COVID years and some of the philosophy and mentality that went with that. But I also think that it is very specific to some of the job description changes that you all have approved for us as well. And I'll tie that back to when we were talking specifically about the construction finisher positions. Those positions used to be classified as just crew worker senior jobs. And that crew worker senior job, if you looked at that job description, it covers everything that Public Works does. So when somebody read that, they had no real idea that we were actually looking for somebody who knew how to finish concrete. So once we made that change to say we are specifically looking for a concrete finisher, and with HR's help being able to grade that classification to where it would be competitive to what the industry pays for a construction finisher or concrete finisher, then we were able to see more candidates with those skills come through the door.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Selma, talk a little bit about, I saw in here, you know, your administration changes have caused the cost to go way down, because it looks like there's been about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 7 or so people transferred out from under here, right, to different departments, so
Correct.
that personnel cost shifted, right, and I'm assuming that when the overtime drops as much as it did, a lot of that potential overtime's going to another department.
So
Right.
that's exactly what you're seeing, Counselor. Those reductions are due to the realignment that took place with some of the other positions that were moved. More specifically from our end, the IT fiber group that used to be managed under Public Works is now handled under IT. So those drops in both categories that you mentioned is shifted with those realignments.
Because it looks to me like once you shift those employees, the major, it's all the raise and the one step, right?
That's correct.
It's basically the net of it
That's correct.
is basically your whole increase is that.
That's
100%.
correct. That's correct. And I did try and shift all of those responsibilities without sending the money with it, but that didn't work.
You're good, but not that good. Can I
Correct.
ask one other question, Mr. Taylor, one more?
Sure.
All right, talk a little bit about the line item about the power of the street light. Because I see we're increasing that, which is always good, but what goes into that $1.5 million?
So there were a couple things that goes into that $1.5 million, and if I say anything that A&F needs to add in addition, I would certainly ask them to do so.
5.8.
But there are a couple things that go with our power street light budget as you see it. The first is we are constantly adding new lights to our system throughout the year. So there is an automatic increase due to that. There's also the changeover that you've seen very aggressive moving from the metal halide to the LED lights. There's a cost associated with that is somewhat new to us in the last 24 months. And lastly, just the expense of power bills and everything else going up associated with that.
So that's in that too?
So what you're seeing in that is really a projection of those costs from
So
previous
the
years.
power's in that too?
Correct.
The power bill's in that too?
Correct.
So really everything that you see in that utility power for street lights and power for traffic lights, that is really only power. That is
Okay.
so what Mr. Green is basically trying to say is that there's an increased power cost, utility cost for moving to a different type of bulb or light attachment. There's also a rate increase that Alabama Power has implemented. That's in there. But all those power for street lights, power for traffic lights, that is literally just Alabama Power bills. If you're talking about infrastructure upgrades, that comes from a more capital side of an expenditure.
What about the consulting firm we hired to come in and draw up the lighting plan?
That would, so the, that would be either in an outside service or in a, capital equipment investment expense. I'm not quite sure where we put that.
And that is actually being facilitated out of the Office of City Engineer.
Is that $50,000 salary for the study?
Well, and don't let me speak to the study because I don't know what's in that. I don't know what the costs are for that study. That would be a Brian Gurney question.
And, back to page 23 in the equipment, is the bulk of that yours?
No, sir. The bulk of that equipment is in construction facilities and grounds.
Okay.
I don't see anything for you. Do I?
Are you gonna make me cry?
No, I'm just wondering, I just,
No, sir. There isn't anything in the equipment list for Public Works at this point, and that is not because we don't have equipment needs. But, you know, I will say for starters that Public Works does not operate in a vacuum. We lean on every other department for what we do. So whatever is an advancement or improvement in one department certainly supports what we do. Where we sit from the equipment standpoint is understanding very first up there in the investment in our future. Everybody has supported the cost increase for our personnel, and that's what we understand our priorities to be, and we will improvise, adapt, and overcome for the rest.
So he has got a future in higher
So you're
politics
saying
here
it's
that
a
I can
very
only
hard
envy.
truck.
Listen, he has
I can only
he knows how to
envy.
talk, doesn't he? He know how to-
Well, I assume you're paying close attention to the discussion on the
I didn't get an answer
the
to my question.
$887,000.
Are you saying, as I understand it, whoever, if you need a truck or something comes up, are y'all working together?
Oh,
with your
absolutely,
talent?
absolutely. All of our
Okay.
field personnel work together.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And you know, Sylvan, I want to thank you for your presentation and your words. I heard you mention the raise that the personnel is getting, which is a great thing. I'm going to kind of piggyback off of what Mr. Phil said. I believe when those persons get in those trucks and they go to work, if those trucks are well, then that's going to build morale and we want to. I want us to be able to pay close attention to that because your workers, your colleagues, they work in extreme conditions every day, rain, sleet, snow, and I just want to mention that so that when we begin to dialogue, that we take all of that into consideration.
Absolutely, and I can appreciate that comment, Counselor. What we have not done a very good job of in the past, and we're trying to do better about it moving forward, is communicating to all of our employees at every level exactly how this process right here works. So they understand where the priorities are, what money is being spent, and why it is being spent. And they understand where their needs fit into that equation. We have not done a very good job, again, of communicating that in the past, and we hope to do better moving forward.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
Thank you, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Mr. Thompson, welcome. What page?
How you doing, Council?
Let's see, CFG will begin on page 69.
59?
69.
All right, good morning, welcome.
Thank you. So CFG has approximately 140 employees for construction, facilities, and grounds. So just about everything you see being built by the city is us. Everything maintained by the city or the city owns and needs maintenance is us. And every blade of grass or tree that needs trimmed that's owned by the city is also us.
Including right of ways?
Yes. No, well,
So,
depending on if it's ALDOT or not, but we do have a right-of-way crew with multiple tractors. So, tree goes down in a storm, our guys are the ones who are gonna respond.
okay,
air
so
conditioning.
streets, that's not, our street right of way manicuring is not Sullivan's department, it's yours?
Correct.
Okay.
Unless you're sweeping it or flushing it.
Okay.
If you're sweeping it or flushing it, are passionate, then it's on us.
So Selwyn does have
appreciate
some guys who can jump in at times and help out, but primarily it's my group.
And you're at how many employees there?
140
140.
approximately. Right now, as of yesterday, we've got 16 vacancies, about 60 people in the landscape right-of-way, 9 admin, 3 at the warehouse, and then around 50 that are between facility maintenance and custodial.
Okay, so same question, and I realize you've been in this job, what, a month?
Approximately.
Is that 16 out of 140, you're again wiggling right around a little more or less than 10%, is that? Do you know if that is historically about?
It's close. You know, with everything that we're taking on, we're actually adding several new employees, and I can get into that, you know, a little bit later. But you know, with the heat, with some of the jobs that we're asking these guys to do and ladies to do, it's 10% is about accurate. The heat doesn't help out, but it's about accurate. So, do you have any specific questions about the budget? I have a feeling you're going to want to ask about.
I wanna know what your capital thing, what is a squad truck?
So those are the international trucks that look like a small 18-wheeler.
Are we back
4
to
doors with a
23
dump bed
now?
on it. Correct. They're the ones that have the dump beds on. They're the ones you see pulling the larger equipment around that the crews need that require CDL.
So at the sort of macro level, Eric, having literally just been in there about a month, how did you come up with this equipment list?
So this equipment list was actually submitted before I took my current role, but this reflects some of
Submitted as part of what, last year's budget, or submitted
the
in
previous.
anticipation of the 24 budget?
Correct. So what you're seeing is a large expenditure for what we're going to be taking on with some of the new Elevate parks coming on line, as well as we've got 8 half-ton pickups, 5 of those, or I'm sorry, 8 half-ton and 3 3/4 ton. I believe 7 of those are going to be replacements from trucks that we either lost last year or getting up in mileage.
Mr. Butler?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Thompson, Eric, your utilities jumped 19.6%.
Yes.
Can you kind of speak to that for me?
So the utilities are paying the light bills and
So,
things of that
yeah.
nature.
Again, the utilities lines within Eric's budget, the same as the utilities and power within Selvin's budget, are all gonna be based on actual utility bills. Those are gonna be water bills, those are gonna be Alabama Power bills, those are gonna be, if we have any gas bills, things of that nature. And, fortunately or unfortunately, Mr. Thompson does not control those, nor does he really set those budgets. What A&F does is we will take usage, so current usage within the facilities, factor in what we think is going to be the rate increases by all of these utilities, and then budget that amount. That's not going to be an item that Mr. Thompson's going to have in his control or purview to be able to create that budget line item. It just sits within his cost center.
Yeah, because the reason I looked at that was because in 2023 was the percentage wise was -1.4, then this year was 19.6. So I wanted to know what kind of caused that big jump like that.
Mine went up at home too.
That's-
Inflation.
So that's
Fire company raised the bill.
that specific item is going to be the coming online of some of the new Elevate parks.
Okay.
What is an IMOP? I'm sorry.
So it's the floor scrubbers. Yeah, we use them at River Market, we use them at the AMP, we use them at City Hall.
Busby, can I ask
Yeah,
a
go
question? Hey, Eric, I know the grounds, I mean, it looks to me like, you've got the raises, but then also the increase in the grounds department's probably the 2 major things that are driving your increase in your budget, right?
Correct.
Because we're hiring more people to do more things. I get that, because you're going up $800,000 almost in the salary line, so I understand that. Talk to me a little bit about when I see outside services now at $500,000, what are things that would be part of an outside services budget?
So-
Or would be considered that?
Well, so going back real fast, if I may, we're actually hiring 14 new positions to come online this year, completely due to Elevate Parks that we're trying to take over. But as far as the outside services go, you're looking at everything from generator repair, sprinkler system, inspection and repair, plumbing, Cintas with the maps you see around City Hall. And then you've got maintenance contracts also built into that, as well as repairs and supplies.
Well, I guess, all of that's being driven by the additional responsibility, right, of what could happen.
All right, so facility maintenance and is about, I think, 6.8, 6.9 a year is what we're budgeting. That's, whenever something breaks, our guys are getting called out to it. Again, Sunday night or Sunday morning, about 3 o'clock, the air conditioner at the airport went out. So our guys had to go out there, they had to replace a switch on the air conditioner unit, and then Trane actually had to come out to help, assist and replace 2 more of them. So, we're paying for the switches, and then we're paying for the maintenance and repair from an outside contractor.
So you said something like most of this comes from the facilities and parks we're trying to take over.
Correct. A lot of the increases
Take over from whom?
that we're building through Elevate.
New ones
Well,
that are
not only
coming on.
Elevate, but also fire stations that are, they're gonna be built this year. But, we've got, Sokol Park that's gonna be coming online. We just bid.
Sokol Park's gonna be coming
Well,
online. What does
the
that mean?
maintenance is gonna be coming over to us, as well as
For the
Colton.
entire park?
The northern part of it.
The northern part, okay.
And then we've got
Uh,
Colton
the
Park,
road.
JC Park, we're gonna take over maintenance on, the Western Riverwalk upon completion. And then again, Snow Hinton is one that we're working through right now.
So in those parks, if it is an Elevate project, there is 15% automatically earmarked for operations and maintenance, right?
Correct.
What about the non-Elevate parks?
As far as maintenance,
How is the maintenance funded there?
Through the general fund.
through-
Where in the general fund?
So within his budget, if we are responsible for maintenance of a park that is non-Elevate, then that amount of work is going to be captured in Mr. Thompson's CFG grounds budget.
Okay, so that would be, can you show me that in here?
Sure, that's on page 75.
75.
So that will be an amalgamation of both non-Elevate and Elevate and
Where-
right of way
where-
and
Oh, where are we looking on 75?
just it's his entire division.
That's the entire grounds division.
There's not a certain line breakout for non-Elevate parks.
It's in that bucket.
It's in that bucket.
And so in that bucket also, we're doing things such as, yesterday we pulled several crews to go out to Old Colony to spread, was it 700 rolls of pine straw? To help them get ready for the golf tournament they have next month.
All right, I still need a little bit of coaching here. So name 2 non-Elevate parks.
So Shelby Park,
Shelby,
and then you've got
Monish Park.
Monish Park, you've got the,
Government laws.
Where,
Government Plaza.
where does the money come from
DuPont
that
Park.
maintains those?
So the money for repairs and supplies?
The grass cutting, maintenance of equipment out there, replacement of worn playground equipment, unstopping a clock, where does that money come from?
So, it would be the salaries, then repairs and supplies to fix any of the mowers or equipment that we need. You've also got, So tip fees is another one that actually went up this year. That's, paying to access the landfill.
All right.
You mentioned Snowhead Park, have we not been taking care? I thought we were.
That's Para. We're gonna take over after the upgrades to it.
All right, are there other questions or comments from either members of the Finance Committee or council at large? Okay, Mr. Thompson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Make sure you loan Selvin a truck if you need some.
Absolutely.
Get that on recording.
All right, let's see, welcome.
Thank you. Hey, how are y'all?
Good.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
What page are we on?
Services,
79.
79, Chris?
All right, so ESD, fully staffed, we have 91 employees, consists of 3 divisions, garbage, trash, and recycling. We currently, of that 91, we have 11 vacancies right now, so we're falling in line with the 10%.
Same thing, around 10-12%.
Yeah, and we see kind of a culture change, just like TPD seeing where we're having a lack of applicants in the laborer division, so.
What's the starting salary there?
We're around 42,000, I think, at ESD for starting. Well, I'm sorry. Yes, 42,000 for a crew worker senior.
Okay, so if I'm coming on board as a newbie, and I'm swinging up onto a truck and riding low 40s is where I
Low
am.
40s, yes, sir. It's not too bad considering what it used to be, but we're still used to. I think we'd see 60 applicants for a crew worker senior position. We're lucky if we see 10. So, but that seems to be getting better over the last few months. Out of that 11, in the 3 months I've been at ESD, we've actually hired 7 people.
Is your attrition consuming your new hires, or the breaking even, or what? Are you losing them as fast as you're hiring?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
We've lost
So
a few, but
You're closing the
we're closing
vacancy
the
gap.
gap, yes, sir. Pretty quick. So hopefully we'll continue that trend. 3 divisions of our biggest division as far as employees go, it would be the trash division. That's 41 employees, 1 supervisor. Garbage, that's 23 employees and 1 supervisor. And then recycling,
What's the difference in trash and garbage?
so trash is the debris that people
That's
put on the
debris
car.
trucks
Yes,
that come-
yes. And then garbage is, of course, your garbage cans that crew does nothing but garbage.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
follow up
Go ahead.
with your other question. Chris, when you say the starting salary is 43, is that a salary or is that an hourly? Is it on an hourly basis based on 40 hours?
Yes, sir.
Is it hourly?
Hourly, yes, sir.
Right. What is it hourly?
$20.82, I think.
So when we implement this pay raise, that will jump that a pretty good bit.
That will help us
That is
significantly.
gonna probably help you solve part of your problem.
Major.
Probably pushes that to $23 an hour.
Yeah, it's gonna be, yes, I think so.
Plus overtime, correct?
Plus overtime. We have a pretty good bit of overtime out of ESD, just like all the other guys do. But, events, we're working events, Fridays or picking up missed trash, which y'all see in y'all's districts a good bit right now. We're working to make that better, but, so yes, with the increase,
Now, you had a crew working Saturday, right, on Hunter's
Yes.
Road? I
Yes.
mean, so that's overtime?
that's overtime. Yeah, that was a litter calling for
Right.
Hunter Road.
Now that's gonna solve a lot of your problems. What's overtime? That's almost, what is that? $35 to $40 an hour.
Pretty
So
good.
with the
too.
COLA increase, the starting salary of just an entry level will be $22.39 an hour.
That's really,
That's impressive.
What is
I
it?
think that's
so
good.
you're getting warmer. I think that's gonna help.
Yeah,
I think that's a good salary for
Yes, sir.
that. Absolutely. Plus with overtime, that's what, Carla? $35 an hour, just about.
At, let's see, 20.
That's $35.79 an hour at overtime rate.
Pretty good.
39 what?
$35.
$35.79 an hour at overtime rate.
How many hours a week do you guys work overtime probably, or in a month?
In a month, I'd say we probably average per employee or just as a whole, per employee, a month, probably 8 hours a piece. well, not a piece. There's a large group that chooses to work the overtime. A lot of them.
Some weeks are more than others too, I
That's right.
get that, whatever, but that's.
Just depends.
Yeah.
Like UA week, we were heavy on overtime. The move-in week. So, recycling division, that, includes our plant, our recycling plant. That's one supervisor and 18 employees. The largest, amount of vacancies we have come from recycling. We have a high turnover in recycling. It's very physical. Of course, y'all know it's rain, sleet, heat, snow. They're out there working. We gotta complete these routes, so
They've got to get out.
they gotta get out. And that, the
It's
recycling
still
is.
more physical than the garbage.
Oh, yes, sir. This is a lot more physical. So they're actually sorting the recycling on the curb with a, we're moving to the one-armed garbage trucks. So they're just working a joystick.
Okay.
Yeah, so these guys are in and out at every single house they stop at. Not only are they in and out, but they're sorting the bins as they
Oh, wow.
get the truck ready to go to the plant to dump it out. So when they get to the plant, they dump the truck over the wall into its designated area. So cans, plastics, paper, cardboard. We have certain areas for each one, and the truck separates it as they pick it up. They're separated on the curb. So this pay will help solve the high turnover rate. It'll make it a little bit better, but that's probably our highest turnover would be our curb sorter jobs. Like I said, we have 11 vacancy. We're closing the gap on that. We do have a small administrative staff of 7. We do have, of course, I got a deputy director on the job, on the board now. I have an administrative coordinator, a scheduler, and a secretary senior. And of course, 3 supervisors.
I just want to point out that I don't get any complaints anymore. I used to get some complaints in the past, but I can't remember the last complaint that had anything to do with y'all.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very, very big compliment,
Well, I thank you. I appreciate it.
because I got people that call and complain,
Yes, sir.
as we all do. But
Yes, sir. I appreciate that. Anything else on the structure? Or? All right. I think we have a garbage truck that you'll see in the equipment side of it. That's, right now, what we have going on, if we have a truck go down and we have to send one out for warranty repair, that'll put that crew on a rear loader truck, which requires 3 employees instead of 1 employee, so that puts us short on the other
That's
trucks.
1 driving and 2 riding.
Yes, sir. And this, so this truck will help be more efficient, and it's definitely safer. It takes the guys off the back.
And how many, what's your total truck fleet?
Total truck fleet?
Yeah.
Probably about, we were 48 trucks.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so
So
you're in
of
that
that,
45 to 50 range. What proportion of that are the new one-arm, single-employee trucks?
we have 9.
9 of those? So
single
you're
trucks.
around 20%, and the goal is to get to 100%?
Yeah, we would like all our garbage trucks to be sidearm trucks is our goal, ultimate goal. There are areas,
What percentage of your garbage trucks are the one-arm bandits?
that's only 10%. So,
10%?
yeah, so out of
9 of those 47 trucks?
Yes, sir. That's right.
how many trucks do you have running that just pick up cardboard?
2.
2?
Yes, sir.
I think that's a great idea. by the
So,
way.
yeah, we have had that question a good bit. If you see a rear loader truck, we just had them decaled now to say cardboard only on them. If they're picking up cardboard, that's their purpose. But I know we've had some calls thinking we're throwing it away. It is actually to recycle
So
cardboard.
before we leave the conversion to the one-arm trucks, if you're at around 20% there, the goal is to get to 100. What is the plan for that?
So we're gonna slowly, like this year, we requested 1. We'll request 2 more in the next coming budgets, and then that'll get us to
And
100.
is that driven by maintenance requirements on or lifespan on the, what
So it's driven,
determines,
some of our rear loaders are fairly new.
okay?
So that's the reason we would not want to recommend to replace them until they're needed.
What's a garbage truck cost?
500,000.
Okay.
Yes, 419,000, I think is the last one.
Yeah,
So we got 25 million garbage trucks? I mean,
No, no,
ballpark,
so
just
his,
between us girls here, it's 50 trucks that have me in each,
Well,
right?
only 10 of those are
His
garbage
fleet
trucks.
is made up of other types of
Yeah.
trucks, not just
Okay.
garbage
So we
trucks.
have 10 garbage trucks, about 25 trash trucks, which are the knuckle booms with the big trailers.
Okay,
And
okay,
then we also have the curb sorters, which is what you see the recycling trucks run.
all
So
right.
we have a combination of 3 different types,
All right,
styles of trucks.
thanks.
You're welcome. All right. Anything on the budget?
How about addressing the two eye poppers there, the 58% increase in auto fuel and maintenance and the 50% drop in other operating?
So the auto fuel and maintenance on these, well, that's one thing we have noticed on the one-arm trucks that we were switching to. Maintenance is extremely high. They're technical. You know, they're one-arm trucks. There's a lot of moving parts that run by a joystick. They have different types of programs on them. We can actually DVR the trucks. We can watch the trucks run their routes. We know.
We can DVR the
Yes,
truck.
sir. They have cameras. That just means we can video the truck all day. We can monitor its progress. We can monitor the carts it's picking up if it's missing carts. They have a lot of technical aspects to them, so it does make the maintenance on them a little bit higher, but it also improves the efficiency in the safety of our fleet. But
You missed that campaign melon?
I
remember.
Yeah.
If you hadn't visited
Hey, if
down
it's-
there, you
if it's
would
mail
know.
or- if it's mail or
I
email,
kept a
I'll probably
souvenir.
get this.
It was actually me driving the truck, which I really appreciate. Even though I didn't have a
Kinda
CD.
So I have to ride on the back, you get to drive them?
Yeah.
You still have that?
So again, not to place responsibility where responsibility is due. The auto fuel and auto maintenance line items are set by A&F. They're not necessarily set by the departments. What we will do is we will take current usage, we will apply current rates, and that's what we will budget. As you mentioned, there is a extraordinary uptick in the cost for auto maintenance, especially in Mr. Megg's department. However, there is a slight down trajectory in the auto fuel line item because gas prices have come down as much as they have from where we budgeted last year.
Well, just one question about that arm. Do y'all have somebody to work on that arm, or do you have to?
We send it to Fleet over in Selvins Group, and they make the determination if they're gonna
Okay.
fix it or send it out, yes, sir.
So, Ms. Standridge, the 58% increase in auto fuel and maintenance then is not driven by fuel. That's actually gone down.
Yes, sir.
The
Correct.
maintenance projections are constructed by A&F.
Yes, sir. And so, yeah, how unfair is that to the department heads? Absolutely, I agree that we set the price and we require them to stick within it. But that's absolutely the case, is that we will take current usage, current projections, and that's what we will give them as a budget for next year.
And so y'all get down into the weeds of this year they've got this many more one-arm trucks and those are more maintenance. Y'all do that?
We do all of the inventory charge outs. When you talk about when Mr. Meggs has a garbage truck versus a recycling truck that goes into the fleet maintenance division to be worked on, each individual part that is put onto that truck, we will then take out piece by piece and then charge to the departments that are using that part. So yes, sir, we get into pretty granular of the pieces of equipment that are being repaired, at what rates they're being repaired, what types of parts are needed on each type, and what the prices of those parts are doing.
But at a 60% projected increase for maintenance, because auto fuel's not a component in that. Did y'all, how do y'all arrive at that? Not
Sure. So
not down in, but do you say the fleet is grown 12% and maintenance costs are going up? Just
Maintenance costs too,
go for it.
maintenance costs too has went up significantly, probably with all our departments, because
But you said the one-arm trucks require more maintenance.
they do, but all of our trucks are now requiring, they're requiring more maintenance, but one thing we're doing to follow the federal guidelines with the FMCSA, the reason we have the CDL training course now is we're required to do inspections daily, so we're really pushing that these guys do accurate inspections and these trucks are maintained. The lights are working, the brakes are intact, the tires are up to specs. So the harder we push that, the more we see a maintenance cost increase too. So instead of them just getting out of their truck and leaving for the day, they have a check sheet they have to do. If that truck goes to the shop, our day is Friday, we're taking 10 to 12 trucks every Friday to fleet maintenance for repairs.
Okay. So shifting to the drop in other operating, what is that?
That is our 8M grant. So we got a grant from, a recycling grant from 8M for $315,000.
That's for the containers
The
that we
drop
put
in
around
your-
this county too, right?
The drop in your cost is the ADM grant?
Yes, sir. That's right? Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a combination, well, so the way that Chris is speaking, yes, it is exactly for the ADM grant that we have. Last year, he was budgeted about $85,000 for equipment investment based off of that ADM grant. Whereas this year, because we don't know that we're going to necessarily receive that grant, even though we've been awarded every year, but you don't count your chickens before they're hatched, we're not going to create a budget line item in 24 where there was one in 23. If you look on page 81, you can see that on the very, very bottom line. So within the budgets, he had about 85,000 in his equipment line on that last one, and he has nothing in the 24 line or in the 24 column.
All right, any other questions or comments? Hey, Mr. Nix, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate what y'all do very
Yes,
much.
sir. Thank you.
Yeah, let's take a 10-minute break. It is 9:30. Let's be back in here at 9:40.
Yes, just one quick note, I'm so sorry to interrupt, on the equipment listing, there is, some investments within, IT equipment needs and infrastructure, and since IT is not a department that is going to be presenting today, because they're not part of the Public Works cluster, then I didn't know if you wanted to speak to Mr. Foster now, or if maybe you wanted to wait and do it at some other time, but he is here to be able to answer any of the equipment lines for IT as well.
All right, so we would be inserting him between environmental services and office of the city engineer.
We can do that, and that way, Mr. Foster can go ahead and answer your questions now, and you can kind of take the equipment side of things in totality.
Please, come on up. Good morning.
Good morning.
Where is your equipment request?
What page that is?
24.
24. So we've got 800 and, right now we're on 24. We're letting IT, who briefed last week, addressing the questions we have on their 825,000 equipment on this capital expenditure list. So tell us what you got here. 600,000 of SAN replacement.
Yes,
that?
that is the primary storage mechanism for all of our servers and that for city infrastructure, both here and at our disaster recovery site at the 911 center. That particular piece of equipment has roughly a 7-year operating life, and it will go end of life in the middle of next year. So we need to.
So this represents a replacement of storage equipment?
Yes, sir.
Not an expansion of storage capacity?
Correct. I believe there is. Maybe we built a 10-ish% capacity increase.
Newer equipment has a little bit better. So what happens to this old equipment?
It just gets decommissioned. It's in
What does
life.
that mean?
We send it to off to ESD for recycling functionally. We'll remove the drives out of it so that there's no data that will leave with them, but the actual husk, if you will, of the equipment is no longer useful. But the manufacturer only supports it for an average of 7 years for that type of equipment, and once they'll no longer support it, it's no longer safe to be running it since it holds it's so valuable, the valuable information that's on it.
Okay, and the security cameras?
We have the primary, I'm trying to remember the exact numbers. All of these cameras that are on the city walk that was made after the tornado.
The city walk, is that?
Yes, it goes all the way from
Alberta.
from Alberta to Rosedale.
From Alberta to Rosedale.
In different.
Alberta Parkway.
To Rosedale Court?
JC, then it picks up at.
It followed the
Hickory
storm.
It follows the storm path.
Okay,
basically.
okay.
But it was built, I believe, in 2015, and those items also have roughly a 7-year operational life. So it's to begin. This is a portion to begin replacement of the security cameras that are along that path, and additional some of the other ones around the city that are far past end of life.
And what is that, what does 225,000 get us? Is that 3 cameras, 5 cameras, 10 cameras?
Cameras
And what
ra-
proportion is that?
Cameras range from 300 to 3,000 a piece, depending on their functionality. I do not have an actual count for the ones that need a replacement, but we did do the math on that.
What's the I don't need the actual count, but if it is addressing the city walk, which goes from Alberta to Rosedale and follows the path of the storm, put me in some rough order of magnitude of what portion of that this is replacing?
That's the entire.
The entire
portion of
thing,
that.
okay.
Yes, sir.
That's an easy proportion. Okay, any questions or comments? So these cameras on the city walk are monitored where and by whom?
PD.
Okay.
monitors them. But they're basically mostly just for public safety.
All right.
That's there.
Last chance, questions, comments? Thank you very much. Office of City Engineers, that's who's up next.
Mr. Gurney.
Mr. Gurney,
Give Brian a hard time.
what page?
Man, excited about you being here, Brian.
What page you on?
Looks like page
Good to see you
89.
too.
You're here.
What page did he say?
What page of the budget book?
So 113.
113? Pretty vanilla.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Office of City Engineer, just simply put, provides engineering support services for the city. So that comes in the forms of projects. So in projects, what we do is we, really from conception to completion, we're managing projects. So we're engineering the solution, or we're hiring engineers and managing those contracts to determine a solution through study or produce a design, and then manage construction through a project. Development wise, we also, really we see ourselves really in two components, projects and development. So on the development side, what we're doing is permitting people's improvements based on our code, stormwater regulations, erosion control regulations. When you come in, you have a new residential apartment complex development. They're going to build sidewalks, and those sidewalks are going to be maintained by the city. They're going to put in sewer and water, still maintained by the city. So we're permitting that they're doing that per our specifications and in a way that we can maintain in perpetuity in the future. We also have a watershed manager who oversees the National Flood Insurance Program that that's related to the flood insurance rates. So stormwater management, floodplain management, we have land surveying, and we have a lot of inspectors supporting all those functions. So we have 27 positions. Currently, we have 5 vacancies.
You have 20 positions and 5?
27.
27.
Are these
Again,
engineering?
that's engineers. That's really, we've got 3 PEs. We've got 3 graduate engineers. 2 of those graduate engineers have passed their test, so they're working on getting their actual PE license. So they'll be new engineers, new professional engineers.
What about openings? Engineering position?
Yes, the vacancies are, we have a civil engineering vacancy, a graduate engineer vacancy, development manager, and engineering aide, and of course we have city engineer vacancy. So
Walk me through that one more time, Brian. You have the vacancies, the engineering vacancies.
yeah, so I have again, of the 27 positions, the vacant positions are city
5.
engineer. Yes, sir.
There's 5 vacancies, right?
Yeah. Yes,
So
sir.
you're at roughly 20% short.
Right.
Okay.
You want me to list them?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so city engineer, civil engineer, that was Tyler, when Tyler left. Graduate engineer, that was when Calvin Culver went to Greene County. A development manager position, and engineering aide position.
What is a development manager?
So it's a position that supported that function of the office in terms like reviewing plans for land development permits. So Mike Gardner, you all know Mike. He he reviews those plans. But we, we have inspectors that go out and make sure that things are being installed per those plans, testing. So the development manager's kind of, it's a position to support the lead in that component of the office's function.
And your position is the associate city engineer?
That's my position.
And there's two of those,
Yeah, me and Mike.
you and Mike, okay,
Right.
so all right.
Just on Bumgarner, what was his,
He was under Selvin.
Oh.
He was in Selvin's group.
Track.
And to be honest, I don't know his
Yeah.
position title, but you know, he was traffic oriented.
Right. He was good.
So-
really good.
He was good.
An expert in traffic.
Brian, two questions on the kind of big picture there. The increase in your salaries and benefits was less than across the board in general. I mean, we're roughly figuring a 9.5%, 10% salary increase on the same personnel base. Yours is 6.5%. Why would yours be lower?
Why would ours be lower?
Am I looking at that right, Ms. Standridge? I mean, assuming the,
Yes, that's a position that was transferred to another department.
that is, okay. And then
Thank you.
skipping down to the auto fuel and maintenance, there's kind of an eye-popping, well, it's only 20 grand, 10 grand. Why down? Is that the drop in fuel, Ms. Standard?
So
It's not
I'm
a
getting to
big
the
number in
details.
his department.
Yeah, so that there is the drop in fuel. How many vehicles do
Is
you
that
have?
city cars? Y'all
Brian?
don't have any big equipment, do you?
Yeah, they're all gonna be inspector vehicles.
Yeah, we have a survey truck. We
Okay.
have 2 construction manager trucks, and I'm gonna say 4 inspector trucks.
Yeah, they're all gonna be general response vehicles. They're not gonna be heavy equipment vehicles, and so
Right.
that low cost of maintenance is not surprising.
Low overall cost of a
Right,
vehicle.
that's new tires, oil changes, filters, that's that kind of
What
thing.
employee got transferred out?
There was a vacant construction manager position that was moved to CFG when CFG was created.
Okay, a vacant construction manager. All right. Okay, any questions, comments, either from finance committee or general counsel, council in general?
Just one thing, Brian, I know that we're working on a project, you and I have been working on a project for my district. And I'm going to be asking what's the best way to get the project done later to the finance committee so that we can do our due diligence at helping the people, I think, that's in Channing Park. So I just want to bring that out, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, comments? All right, Brian, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Brian.
Jeff, TCL. What page?
Let's see, airport is on.
47.
47.
Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
It's good to be here today. We finished up our FA inspection last week. So a lot of our staff, a lot of our budget goes into the results of those inspections, and we'll be briefing you hopefully in September some of the results and kind of what goes into that process. But we are 8 employees, full-time employees at the airport. 4 of those are maintenance related. 3 are operations, and we have a secretary senior that supports all of our staff. We have no vacancies, but the biggest change in our budget is the proposed step raise in COLA. And the secretary did receive a promotion, so that accounts for that change compared to last year's budget.
Is that one of the approvals that went through admin and policy recently?
That's correct. It was back in, I think, January.
Okay.
Other change in our budget is our outside services. We were
very fortunate to have some new lease agreements on the airport that are unbudgeted airport revenues. And we recommended in this budget to use those revenues to support additional outside services in our legal services that we currently have a contract. We just want to make that a permanent part of our budget. That helps us with the leases. They helped us draft the rent abatement program that we came to council just a few weeks ago.
Why don't we not do that in-house?
It's a very specialized skill set from, they have the vantage point of what the FAA expects. So if we have those as needed requests, they're not a retainer or anything. If we need support to provide that perspective, we reach out to them and they provide us that service. So they're an airport law firm. And then we've had some recent.
And where is that in here?
It's in the outside services.
I'm looking for outside, okay, line, the 99,000,
That's page 51.
yeah. So, you had 61,000 in 23, 55 in 22, 61 in 23. And the mayor's recommendation is 99,000 this year.
That's correct.
What's
in our outside services?
Well, yeah, you mentioned the legal. Is this different? Has that not been in 22 and 23?
It was not. It's not an expense that was in outside services. We made a recommendation to use our airport improvement funds that's generated from our airport fees. We want to go ahead and make that as an annual part of our outside services versus a new request each year.
Okay.
So our outside service, just kind of what covers that 99,000. We have 3 sprays a year for the airfield, which is about
3 what?
3 airfield sprayings for weed control.
Sprayings?
Yes, sir, and growth inhibitors, so we're not having to mow as often. We have overtime for our air traffic control tower that we pay for our game day weekends. They close at 8, so anything past 8 p.m. we request and pay for those services. We're expecting more. We've seen a pattern of more security camera and gate maintenance work due to the volume of gate usage and our cameras that we got a grant for back in 2016. We're seeing those starting to come offline. One camera is about 2,200, so between gates and cameras, we've added that 15,000. And then TTL supports us in our ADEM sampling. We'll reduce 2 samplings a year, a part of our ADEM permit.
All right. And is all of that rolled up on the front page under your other operating? Those outside services, et cetera?
So on airports, yes, outside services would be in their other operating as well as their, let's see, another large one. Their repairs and supplies, their power for runway lights, all of those would be in other operating.
What do we charge, Jeff, approximately? I don't want to put you on the spot, but for these jets, we'll have a whole bunch of them coming in a couple of weeks.
They will, depending on the day. Today, just a normal landing fee will apply. It's $2 per 1,000 pounds. So if it's a 40,000 pounds, it'll be $80. On a game day, it'll be the landing fee and a special event fee, and the fees are scaled by the size of the aircraft. So it averages around between $75 to $250 per plane on a day on a home football game weekend.
Do you know if that's what other people charge? Is that about?
It is. I think you're starting to see a change. When the landing fees came out, it was more of an airline-specific thing, but because budgets are getting harder and trying to generate new revenues, you're seeing more of your general aviation airports do that. So our size airports, we're starting to see that being more commonplace. $1.50 to $2.50 is about the range we're seeing, and it's only applicable to a certain size. So your flight training, your really small aircraft, it does not apply. There's an exemption within an ordinance that shows which ones are charged. But usually anything business related is where you're charging that $1.50 per or $2 per 1,000 pounds.
So Jeff, I'm a little confused on the salary portion. Looking on page 51, on the front page, page 47, under salaries and benefits, there's an 18.5% increase. We talked about the COLA and the upgrade of a secretary position.
Yes, sir.
On page 51, when we look at salaries, it jumps from 314,000 in 23 to 462,000. That's a 35% increase.
So
what's
what you're
going on
looking
there?
at in the actual 314 is what was actually expended to date and not what's been budgeted. So what you want to look at is the
Okay,
2023
I got
revised
you.
budget, 396 to 462.
And do you have any vacancies yet?
We don't. We hired, we hired 2 employees in January, so that's probably why the actual is so much lower. They didn't get a full year
Okay.
of employment in our department.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Jeff, talk a little bit about, like right now, I know we just applied for some more grants. There's a lot of different things going on. Where are we on upgrading the airport a little bit, and what's potentially in process right now that could help us?
So ALDOT and FAA have already sent out call for projects. It's an annual notice to airports, all airports throughout the state, where in September we file our next pre-application for grant eligible projects. So we've already been with our engineer and had our preliminary meeting with ALDOT last week to go over those. They didn't show any concerns, so we're gonna be coming to council probably 3 weeks from now to go ahead and approve the next 5-year list of projects for consideration. And then eventually they'll tell us what projects they're interested in applying for. That's the normal process where ALDOT grants, bipartisan infrastructure law grants, the airport improvement program under FAA, all those programs or all those projects fall under that application, and that starts the process. Then they'll, around January or February, they'll give us a go letter saying, hey, we expect to award this grant, go ahead and start your design, your bid phase services. So September is that annual start of the next round of grants. There's also future notice of funding opportunities, NOFOs. That's where the airport terminal program comes out. We're expecting November this year. It has not officially been announced yet, but a part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. It's a 5-year program specific for terminals. That's the other application we expect to be filing for in the near term. So we're always kind of looking out for grant opportunities. It's not just FAA, so those, a lot of our staff time is looking and making sure that those are getting applied on time and making sure that we're from a funding standpoint, we're programming that appropriately as soon as we find out about it. But a lot of that is exactly how we've made improvements to the airports, in the past 10 years. We've raised about $45 million for the airport in the last 10 years.
Through grants.
Through grants, yes, sir.
Okay, any other questions, comments? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Water and sewer.
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
So, to start out, we have approximately, in the water and sewer department, 200,
Excuse me, what page?
The whole tab.
150.
The water and sewer
Oh,
tab.
oh, yeah, I'm sorry, thank you. I'm asleep.
200 and,
we have approximately 206 employees. We've done a little bit of shifting right now, so there's a couple that are kind of in limbo. But 206 that are in the water and sewer department, and then there are 5 that are budgeted out of the water and sewer funds, but actually are in the office of the city engineer. So, they do the development work related to water and sewer. So they're funded out of this. So
that part of that 12% that we assign.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
So you've got 5 employees that are in the engineer's office.
Well, they're OCE employees, but they're funded by water and sewer.
They're funded by water.
Yes, sir.
What I was asking is that part of that 12%? It's not?
It's in our budget.
It's in your budget?
Yeah, we have a water and sewer.
All right, keep moving, Karen.
Okay, and we have 29 vacancies throughout.
So you also were right around the 10% mark, right?
it's about 15%, yes.
Okay.
And so we're broken out into 5 divisions. So we have the Water and Sewer Business Office side. We have Ashley Price's group, which is the Finance and Special Projects side. We have the Vacant Capital Projects side, which that position will start on September 11th. We have the Process Asset side and then the Linear Asset side. Our biggest issue as far as vacancies would be in field staff, and those fall mostly within the Linear Assets group. So those are going to be crew worker, meter reader, crew worker senior, heavy equipment operators, and then also operators for water and wastewater plants, and then field staff related to those as well. So of the 29 vacancies, 20 of those are within field positions. So your pay grade 5, 6, 7, and 8. 5, 6, and 8.
What do you do about that?
We're constantly having interviews. We actually have 3 recommendations out there that have passed background checks for, recently from one actual interview, which is a huge improvement from where we've been. We've struggled with a lot of people. We'll get people in, and if they do show up for the interview, a lot of times they don't pass the background checks and things like that. So, but we do feel like that we are actually getting some more applicants, people applying. They just might not necessarily be passing everything that the city requires. Or we have ones that don't want to show up for the drug testing, things like that. So we tend to have to sit on some of those for a while to get them through the process. But yeah, and then we also have 4 part-time positions right now that are working in the meter side of the house.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a
Yeah, go
question?
ahead. Mr. Crowe.
This is probably gonna be directed toward Carly and Becky, but, the sentence in here that says our current budget deficit's $3.8 million. Carly, that's not for the whole year yet, is it? Or is that just based on set?
That is for the whole year, yes, sir. So the water and sewer fund is not required to be balanced, and so we never pass a balanced budget. We do budget depreciation expense, which is about $9 million. That's not a direct expenditure, just an expense. We also will budget debt service, full debt service, including the principal.
But $9 million of it's depreciation, so you technically have to add that back. We're talking cash, right? We're talking.
Yes, sir. If you're thinking about, like, if you're trying to make the water and sewer fund think like the general fund, then yes, add the depreciation back in.
Okay.
So does that also explain, I was embarrassed to ask my question, but I think it's the same answer. When we look on page 155 at the 2024 revenues, the expectation is 66,800,000.
Yes, sir.
When we look at the next page, 2024 proposed expenditures, it's 70 million, so there's a
3.827.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that is because we're not required, because as an enterprise fund, not required for a balanced budget.
It has
and
nothing to do with it being an
depreciation.
enterprise fund.
Well-
It has nothing to do with it being an enterprise fund. That's more so that it is not, so state law requires that the general fund be a balanced budget. There is no such requirement for any utility fund within the city, and the city council itself through code does not require it be a balanced budget in and of itself. So there's just no requirement for the city to have a balanced water and sewer fund budget. An enterprise fund, the way that it's designated is that we charge for a service. So you have to be able to charge for a service to be able to be classified as an enterprise fund. If you then classify it as an enterprise fund, you do full business style, full accrual accounting. And so that's when you have to be able to, go ahead and book the depreciation expense.
And so if this was a private business, we'd be putting X million in our pockets, right?
So if
Because
you
of
were,
depreciation.
yeah,
We'd be putting. what,
if you
4 or
didn't
5?
if you didn't reinvest in
That's it.
equipment for that $9 million,
Uh-huh.
then yes, sir, you're correct.
And by in our pockets, I would include the reinvesting for upgrading of equipment.
Sure. Yeah, then yes, sir.
But prior to these couple of budgets, when we first started this adventure a few years ago, that deficit was a lot larger than $3 million, wasn't it?
We've kept it 4 million or below for as long as I can remember.
Okay.
So if we were to raise the water bills $10 a person, we could break even.
No, sir. So, now remember, we're already raising rates,
I mean,
9%.
I'm not advocating that for anybody that's listening. I'm just wondering how in the world, if we had to break even, we do that.
We can do that analysis,
I mean, that's
on,
okay, I was just a ballpark idea,
I
I mean,
think,
we'd have to raise the rates to get that $4
Yes,
million
sir.
back.
yes, sir, absolutely.
Alright. We don't have any major surprises in the, water and sewer accounts this year. I think our increase overall is about 7%, which mostly is due to salaries, the salary increases. As far as the capital equipment, as y'all have already discussed, we just are requesting the one raw sewage pump, and so we're requesting to, one pump each year to try to get those replaced. There's 7 of those. So that will show up each year. We are trying to not put as much in replacing equipment and doing more maintenance. We're getting, our maintenance techs and stuff are getting a little more skilled, so they're able to work on some of our equipment, not necessarily the vehicles, but some of our equipment and things that we have historically had to replace or send off or that kind of thing. So we're able to maintain some of our equipment longer. And then also, as you know, we have a lot of capital projects coming up that are in the SRF funding, the bond funding, the ARPA funds, and so there's a lot of things that you probably wouldn't normally see in our budget that are gonna be taken care of with capital projects and those larger expenses.
This is from my education, and it harks back to the, catch that harks back. How many times have you used that in conversation?
Never.
The 9 million of depreciation, and you just talked about how the great bulk of replacement, replenishment, and maintenance is coming out of some of these other project funds. But who figures, is it a finance and accounting or an operational we're getting $9 million of depreciation, which tells us that it's recognized that so much of that equipment is having to be upgraded and repaired every year. That's why we get the depreciation. Who identifies how much that is?
Well, finance,
Are you talking about for the actual depreciation amount?
No. How much of that depreciation amount is actually plowed back into keeping that equipment new and operating and refurbished?
So none of the 9 million of a depreciation expense is then directly put back into reinvestment in the system. The
But
reinvestment comes through usually the bond issuances and the surplus transfers at the end of the year. So it's not, so there is no direct link between the depreciation and what we decide to put back into the system. What we decide to put back into the system is based off of need, and what the operating department will say, we need to see this type of investment or else the system will be at a loss.
Gotcha.
I hate to say it, but the depreciation expense is an accounting function
Purely an
alone.
accounting function,
Yes.
and it doesn't vary by industry particularly. I mean,
No,
in general, it's
Based on your
long-term capital equipment is, you get this much depreciation.
and when our asset value rises, because, yes, Mr. Crow is right, your depreciation is a function of the asset
Of your
value.
asset.
And so when your asset value increases, your depreciation expense is going to increase along with it.
But it does potentially show you what your cash flow, what your true, because that's a non-cash. I mean, I guess I'm just struggling with looking at that and seeing a deficit of $3 million. Well, why is that? Well, part of it is $9 million for depreciation, right? It's a non-cash. I mean, so technically your books may show that, but you've got more free cash flow to spend on the system, correct?
Correct, and which is why whenever people, so if we're going to get down to the nitty gritty of accounting theory when it comes to an enterprise fund, I will 100% always point people to the cash flow statement that we are required to present based off of the enterprise accounting via the government. So when you create an enterprise fund, then you are required to do full accrual accounting, like I mentioned before. You're also required to produce a cash flow statement. That cash flow statement within our financial statements will show you the cash that you bring in for operations, the cash that you push out for operations, the cash that you push out for investment back in the system, and then possible financing as well. So really,
Would you say that's a better indicator of the health of that? If you're looking at that, is that?
I think it's a
true
piece.
statement?
It's a piece of it. It's a hefty piece of understanding the health of the activity within the water and sewer fund. Yes. And I will say, and this is not to brag on the entire city operation that goes into the water and sewer fund, but the water and sewer fund cash flow from operations has always been extremely positive. There's never been close to any negative balance within cash flow from operations.
Okay.
Good.
Any other questions, comments? Anything else you would like to leave us with?
I mean, most of our operating items are, there's no surprises in any of them. It's the typical.
There's not.
Yeah.
Pretty vanilla.
Right.
Ms. Michael, you mentioned the pay maintenance recommendation, so the council, Mr. Busby,
Yeah.
we're gonna be asking for an amendment to my submittal, regarding, pay maintenance negotiations.
Regarding what, Mayor?
Pay maintenance negotiations.
Paymentus
And
negotiation.
so, it's a $307,000 adjustment, and I would like, if you wouldn't mind, Kimberly, to review that with you.
Sure.
It's gonna be very good for our ratepayers and provide our ratepayers the savings, but there is a cost, and we're recommending that cost, be borne by the city.
That what you emailed to us yesterday?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So what this is currently
figure out
we
what
use
that
ACI
was.
as the name of the company. And when you go in and make payments online, whether you use a debit card or a credit card, there's a fee associated with that.
Yeah.
We're transitioning very soon to Paymentus. And with Paymentus, there were several options, some that weren't as great as what we had hoped. Some of the fees were gonna be a little bit higher. They were setting limits on what we could, the amount that we could and couldn't pay online. And so what we've opted to do and feel like is the best for all the ratepayers and also to be able to make more payments online and encourage people to pay online is that we've opted to cover those fees in-house. And so that increase is a $307,000 increase, $90,000 of which we've already budgeted for. So it would be about a $217,000 increase to our overall budget that is not reflected currently. But with that, it basically allows everyone to make payments to their water and sewer bills online without any fee at all, whether you pay by credit card, by debit card, by Venmo, PayPal, checks, any of those things. So they will no longer have any of those fees, which we hope would encourage people to pay online when we move to that in the next couple months.
Is that gonna save in the business office?
As far as
Money,
well, it's an overall expense to the city, but the hope would be that you would have more customers paying online, which would help free up more time within the office, things to that nature as well. But yeah, we're trying to make it more customer friendly, more convenient for the customers to pay their bills online and not feel like they have to come to the business office so that they don't incur a fee.
Paymentus is the payment system that will allow our customers to pay using any mechanism without a fee.
We are opting to not charge the fee back to the customer.
We're paying.
So,
The city would be
we
paying.
would incur the cost of that fee, which would be the increase in the overall budget that we're talking about. That's not reflected in your books right now.
Okay, so there's a revision to the proposal coming that'll outline this. You mentioned 90,000 and 200 and,
90,000, the overall increase is 307,000.
right?
90,000 we already have budgeted
is
in this.
programmed, right?
Yes, sir. So the additional that we would be looking to amend our budget is 217,000.
Okay. And what's the rationale? I can't see, Mayor, what's the rationale? When you say have the city pay for it, I assume you mean it would come out of the general fund?
No, it would come out of the water and sewer
Out of the
fund.
water and sewer, okay.
The rationale is this, one, we want to encourage people to go into our payment system when it becomes live and active. We think by not having fees, it would do that. Number two is that ratepayers, certainly as we've invested in our $300 million plan over the past couple of years and continuing forward for the next 8 years, this is a little bit of a savings that we would be able to provide back to ratepayers if they indeed decided to go online. We just think from a simplicity standpoint, it makes a lot of sense for us to go in this direction. The other, with Paymentus, we were, again, it was negotiations that didn't wrap up in time for the budget presentation. So Kimberly had already put some seed money of $90,000, I think was what she just said. The $217,000 additional, we think, is out of a $66 million budget, a very small amount, but could pay big dividends on that investment moving forward. We're excited about rolling out the Paymentus system later this fall. It'll be a huge leap for us in terms of water and sewer utility billing that has not been very good for a few years now, which is my fault. And so we think this will be a great leap forward, and we want to encourage people to get onto that platform. It will certainly help in our modernization of our water and sewer billing operations.
And is that, that service fee that we would be covering, that's an annual ongoing amount?
It could be. It'll be up to the city of Tuscaloosa whether to have that.
But I mean, the cost of it.
The cost of it, yes.
But if people would do it straight from their bank account, and I know everybody can't do that,
cost
there's no
will be
charge
based
for
on
that.
That's correct.
That's right. And you got to remember, every time we mail a bill, there's a cost.
Yeah, sure.
So every time we move someone from the traditional bill payment system to an online payment system, there is a cost savings. Now, I can't tell you today whether that cost savings is going to probably balance out, but what it will is on-time payments. With a traditional mailing system, there's not that assurity of that bill being paid at that time. And so we like the assurity that it gives us. We like the fact that it'll free up staff time. We like all the things associated with it, and we want to encourage people to do this. Right now, we have, 6,000 people on ACH draft?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then probably how many more paying online just on?
Was it 16,000? 14,000?
So we roughly have about 1/3 of our customer base that are doing online or ACH payments. We would love to see that number increase, because that means the rest of our customer base is basically either coming to the water and sewer department or they're paying through the traditional billing method.
And also, I do want to point out that if you do sign up for e-bill, and I have e-bill, and this is why I know this, and I get the emails when we actually are telling the billing company to send the bills out, and I have my water bill within like an hour. So from the time that we push the bill, I have my water bill. So there's so many advantages to doing electronic billing, and then also being able to pay online. The payments with Paymentus, the payments are updated. Is it every 15 minutes? So if you pay a bill late at night, it's going to be reflected the next morning. There's not going to be those gaps in the payment, the bill going out, and things like that.
There's also, if people sign up for either e-bills or we're not billing people, there's a cost savings we're gonna pick up in that.
Yes.
It helps offset this.
Yeah, and we're
Because
charged
we're not
monthly by
mailing
what we print out
it's
and mail.
60 cents to mail a bill, right? Plus
Yeah.
whatever administrative time to produce a bill like that. If you're just getting an email, right, we're gonna save money on that, those personnel costs.
And then I would assume to process the payments when they come in.
Absolutely, you gotta touch them.
And
That's a
it's
lot.
important to me that we restore confidence in our water and sewer billing. Between COVID, Pinnacle and their surprise decision to close their doors, it created issues within our water and sewer billing utility operations. And Kimberly and Ashley have done a really good job, Alvin, of moving us, rebuilding, restoring We believe Paymentus can be a huge step in that direction. We are testing it and retesting it before really a large unveiling of it. We think that if we can encourage people to do this, it gives people what they want. It's what we all want in any utility bill. We want it to be on time, we want it to be accurate, and we want to be able to pay it easily. So this will be a huge step, and I can't say enough about the job that they've done. If y'all remember those reports, remember when the times we were looking over $1 million of unpaid bills during the middle of COVID? You know, this department's been through a lot, and so this, to me, I'm very excited about. I don't want to overpromise it, because anytime you move out a new technology, but I can't say enough about that department, IT, and what Jason Foster's group has been able to do. So we think, again, getting back to encouraging people to use it, as Mr. Crow more eloquently stated than I did, that has a savings and a benefit to our ratepayers now and into the future.
And when and where will, so there'll be a revision to your recommendation to us?
Procedurally, I will let Ms. Standridge and the chief tell us how they would like to proceed if you're open to that as a council.
So this is exactly kind of what we used that tracking sheet that we showed last time for. So if you are amenable to this, we will add it to our update sheet for the overall budget. And so whenever we present the budget ordinance to the committee and to the council, it will already have this 215,000 worked into that amount.
And unlike the general fund, so the general fund, 215,000 more expense means 215,000 reduced somewhere else.
Correct.
Not in the water and sewer budget.
Correct.
Okay. So there won't be a corresponding take from another category.
Just suspended.
When do we anticipate having updated water and sewer revenues?
We already have them and there's no ad.
There's no ad? Even with over 30+ million gallons a day we've been pouring out?
So that's on production. Production and revenue don't necessarily match together.
That production has yet to be built.
Production has yet to be billed, and production and revenue don't necessarily always tie to each other, yes.
But the usage increase that you've been seeing in the last week and a half, that ain't even built out yet.
We've been pumping close to 40 million.
God bless America.
Treated water a day. It's pretty impressive.
Well, we've had a bit of a drought, so.
Kind of dry.
Okay, any other questions or comments from Ms. Michael, Finance Committee or the other council members?
Did you want to talk about the projects that are on the ARPA funds?
Yes, please.
So, there are 4 projects that are on that: the campus area, water tank and distribution project, the Clements Road Booster Pump Station, Lift Station 10 and 11, and the raw sewage and aeration improvements at the wastewater plant. So for the campus area, tank and distribution project and the Clements Road project, those are basically at closeout. The construction's complete. There's a few minor things that we're working out, waiting on a generator, things like that. Between those 2 projects, we'll probably have close to $1 million left over. Lift Station 10 and 11 and the raw sewage and aeration improvements project, those are still very much underway, but those are also going to be offset with SRF costs, so I don't foresee there being any money left over with those 2.
Gentlemen, any questions or comments?
That's good.
Thanks very much. Mr. Stanton or Mayor, any wrap up that you'd like before we adjourn from here?
Yes, sir.
Just as a quick, for the numbers, we will add the 215 for water and sewer, and everybody's okay with adding the 887,000 for revenues to the general fund, correct? With nothing else coming
You're okay with
out.
adding the revenues, right?
Right, with nothing else coming out of that.
Okay. All right,